Hello, my name is George Fenton. I'm one of the team that's been working on the ULS project, and I'm pleased today to talk to you about the distribution chapter, which is part of the pilot initiative that we are currently undertaking. Distribution refers to the handover of assistance to the final user or recipient. Traditionally, distributions refer to the donation of physical goods. However, with the scale up of cash and voucher assistance, there is a need to consider the most appropriate modality. This has implications, of course, for distribution activities, as well as the setup and human resources required. Many stakeholders are involved where many activities run simultaneously, and recipients are often extremely vulnerable, and then there is an imbalance of power between those delivering and those receiving assistance. Therefore, the need for a high level of coordination, efficiency, and timeliness is absolutely crucial. It's good to note that this chapter is complementary to the Sphere Standard 6.3 particularly, on targeting distribution and delivery of food assistance. And further reading on this topic is absolutely essential for those providing logistics and supply chain management support, as this is a highly complex and sensitive activity. The distribution chapter in ULS covers 6 standards for distribution planning, site selection, operations, monitoring, risk assessment, and environmental impact. Standard 1 is about distribution planning, and the standard states that distribution is collaboratively designed and planned to best serve the population in need, adapted to operational operational environment and type and nature of assistance being provided. Key actions here are to ensure that the distribution plan clearly defines what is to be delivered to whom, where, and when. It's good to evaluate the logistics requirements, viability, and risks in the local context for different distribution modalities, such as cash, vouchers, and goods in kind, as well as the capacities of all stakeholders, infrastructure, and available resources. It's good to integrate the distribution plan within the broader context and overall humanitarian response, ensuring that it is part of general supply planning while minimizing any negative impact on the local community and others. It's good to consult with key stakeholders during the design and planning of the distribution, including the affected population, host community, other agencies, donors, suppliers, local government authorities, etc. It's good to design the delivery network around how goods will reach recipients, agreeing on the number and location of distribution sites, and there may be a need to compromise between the limitations of cost and environmental impact of transport while minimizing the distance which affected communities need to travel to receive distributions. It's good to ensure that the means for which recipients are identified and registered is adapted to local norms and contexts and to the distribution process itself. And it's of course good to include a plan for dealing with eligible but unregistered beneficiaries or any no-shows. The key indicators here are around the fact that a distribution plan provides for essential information on logistics implementation, as well as agreed with relevant stakeholders, including the affected population. It's good to track the percentage of distribution sites reporting shortages of goods. And it's good to track the deviation in time and in cost from the original distribution plan. General guidance notes include things like logistics implications, viability and risks of any distribution activity should be assessed, and consider factors such as the scope and urgency of the intervention, the population being in open or closed settings, i.e. camp setting or in a rural community, the type and nature of goods to be delivered, equipment and supplies needed to distribute the goods, the handover modalities, including risks of abuse or exploitation occurring from the distribution, supply chain capacity to deliver the goods, and the impact on local markets. The preferences of affected communities and their choices should also be considered, of course, and their dignity and empowerment and the appropriateness of the distributed items are really important. Consider marginalized or oppressed groups within the community and whether it may be necessary to conduct different types of distribution for different sub-communities. The use of cash and voucher assistance to meet objectives should be considered from the beginning where appropriate and feasible. And the decision on which modality to apply may need to be justified. The distribution can be optimized and an appropriate combination of modalities may be appropriate. But it's good, again, to consider how risks of exploitation and abuse occurring are monitored and mitigated as far as feasible. Agree on delivery schedules and setup of goods to be delivered. And any changes should be negotiated and agreed with all stakeholders, avoiding any prejudices. And there are many more points to consider under this standard, which is really critical. And so further reading is available within the standard and of course through other sources. The second standard is around site selection, and the standard states that distribution sites are located and set up to achieve the best performance, offering adequate space and access to services. Key actions here are to involve a range of stakeholders, including groups within the affected population, in site selection and setup, and to locate the distribution sites in suitable, accessible, and safe places, considering also the distance that people must travel to the sites. It's good to organize the distributions, defining a clear and logical layout, providing accessibility, space, adequate safety measures, and sufficient staffing and equipment, and furniture for all the required activities. Key indicators include that there should be a distribution site plan providing essential information on site layout and space use. The average time that a recipient is waiting from the beginning of the distribution to receiving assistance should be tracked. Also, the percentage of sites that report issues with safe access for recipients and other stakeholders, and the percentage of sites which report issues with distributions related to the location and organization of the site should be tracked. General guidance notes include the importance to ensure that the distribution sites are suitable and safe, considering the following factors, such as affected population, staff, service providers, etc., and acknowledge that it is a secure location, that there is availability of transport and a reasonable road system where access for vehicles carrying goods can travel without being blocked for whatever reason. There should be, in hot contexts, hot climates, there should be shade. Of course, there should always be water and latrines for affected communities while queuing. And there should be availability of an evacuation route for staff in case of any security problems. The location should be flat and free from mud or dust, and should be away from sensitive sites like army bases or political party offices or police stations. And when designing the layout of the distribution site, consider the need for there to be a registration area where affected people can report. There should be a zone adjacent to the registration sites, but with controlled access so that only registered people can line up for distributions. And there should be safe workspace for reception of goods, storage, packing or repacking of commodities. And there should be ideally waste collection points, including where possible a separation of recyclable and compostable materials. It's also good to ensure that there's adequate representation of female staff within the distribution teams, and ensure that people of diverse gender identity and expression are able to safely access distributions. Consult with these groups to identify and address concerns and foster safeguarding and protection-sensitive thinking by relying on clear exchange of information between distribution staff and by assisting affected communities in communicating their concerns. A gender balance among staff, as well as transparency in distributions, can help prevent sexual exploitation and abuse. And again, there are other current key important points to consider. So please, again, review further information within this standard and from other sources. Standard number 3 is around operations, and the standard states that people receive assistance distributed in an effective, accurate, and transparent manner. The key actions here are to coordinate with all stakeholders to ensure that goods are delivered on time. It's good to verify the target population list and where of course applicable, and define clear responsibilities and accountability mechanisms. Ensure among participating agencies, service providers, and community groups, again, that there is a good understanding of responsibilities. Ensure segregation of duties, of course, between teams identifying needs, teams distributing the goods, and teams verifying the distributions, so as to avoid one person or team participating in more than one of these duties. Ensure that the distribution team and other stakeholders such as financial service providers or community representatives are aware of the tasks that they are expected to fulfill, and establish clear communication and reporting mechanisms to communicate with team members and key stakeholders, and to collect complaints, needs, targeting issues, quality issues, etc. Key indicators that should be tracked is around the percentage of items that are delivered to recipients in good condition and in an appropriate manner, percentage of deviation between distribution of records and item quality, the quantity of items consumed, the percentage of any unregistered recipients, or those not showing up to sites, or those sites with staffing shortages. General guidance notes include things like making sure you have the necessary permits to carry out the distribution, and that all relevant stakeholders have been consulted, including the local authorities. The actual or perceived shortage of goods can cause stress to participants, and in some cases can spark a security incident. Therefore, to ensure that the distribution plans are matched to realistic delivery schedules is essential. It's good to test the appropriateness and the distribution sites in advance, so that on the day of the distribution, everyone is acquainted with the plan and their role within the distribution chain. Perhaps it's good to pilot a small-scale distribution initially to address and resolve any issues before the main scale-up of the distributions, and ensure that the community is informed in advance of distributions of what the criteria are and what the eligibility is for assistance, and have that mechanism in place, again, for any complaints and feedback on the criteria and inclusion on the distribution list. In all distribution sites, display clear information related to entitlements, codes of conduct, and complaints mechanisms, as well as data privacy. And ensure that inquiries are directed to designated staff, not at the actual people doing the distribution. It is therefore recommended to have a separate area for resolving inquiries and complaints, and prevent any unauthorized access. Standard number 4 is around monitoring, and the standard states that performance and impact of the distribution is monitored to achieve optimal results and to enable any corrective action in a timely manner. Key actions here are around ensuring the delivery of assistance is recorded accurately, the development of an information management system providing sufficient, accurate, and up-to-date information is set up to enable effective delivery, and that people are trained for data collection that can be used for monitoring and sharing. Again, monitor both distribution activities and the impact of the distribution on the people being assisted, and perform reconciliations at the end of every distribution consistently and in a timely manner, and regularly analyze data and provide feedback on quality, efficiency, and impact to improve future planning. Key indicators here include that the distribution monitoring system provides the essential information on the distribution process, that there is a percentage of reconciliation of records monitored, those records with no discrepancy at the end of the day, again, should be tracked. And the frequency of distribution reports produced should be shared, and the percentage of staff and volunteers trained on data collection should be also tracked. Other considerations are around the information system, is that it should be used for key monitoring and distribution performance and results, ensuring that the team understands how to input information and its importance and how best to use the information. Use standardized reporting and monitoring templates across the distribution sites, reporting key details about such as people receiving full entitlement, number of goods or kits distributed, etc. The accuracy of record keeping and the reception of goods by the distribution team and the delivery of goods to recipients, what, where, when, and to whom is also critical. And again, documenting the reconciliation process with clear authorizations is also important. For cash and voucher assistance, it's good to monitor the liquidity of agents, financial service providers, to optimize the number of households who can access cash or voucher-based assistance, and that vendors, vendor commodities, quality and availability should be optimized and support provided where necessary to ensure that the number of households redeeming vouchers can be maximized. It's good to track the infrastructure and monitor things like the ATM network, if that's available, mobile phone network coverage, etc., to ensure that cash and voucher assistance can be used appropriately and efficiently. And of course, it's good to monitor any fraudulent activities. Standard number 5 is around risk assessment. And the standard states that distribution is safe and secure and grants protection and dignity for people affected by crisis, as well as workers and volunteers. And the key actions here are to undertake safety, security, safeguarding, and corruption risk assessments, and initiate prevention and mitigation strategies with a special emphasis on risks to vulnerable groups and individuals. It's good to set up feedback and complaints mechanisms where appropriate and safe and confidential, and that the availability of these mechanisms is known and is accessible. It's good to ensure that affected communities understand why they have been selected, what they're entitled to, and that there are clear communications with communities in order to ensure that there is no confusion, reduce any anxiety, and ensure that relevant communities and groups ensure their viewpoints are understood, whether they're positive or negative, and that they're well considered. In doing so, this will reduce the risks that may be created, enable appropriate services, improve the intervention quality, and establish good accountability. It's good to establish anti-corruption and safeguarding policies and procedures, including a staff code of conduct, ensuring that all staff are trained on these policies and understand them. Key indicators here are around the availability of an appropriate complaints and feedback mechanism, the number of complaints recorded as a percentage of total respondents, the percentage of complaints addressed, the percentage of distribution events reporting safety and security incidents, or the percentage of staff trained in anti-corruption and safeguarding policies and procedures. General guidance notes here include identifying measures to mitigate any vulnerabilities of affected communities, considering special needs and factors such as the time and distance to distribution points, long waiting times under harsh climate conditions, lack of water, lack of sanitary facilities, goods that are difficult to handle and transport from a distribution, and any potential threats to those receiving items at the distribution. Again, the complaints feedback mechanism is the cornerstone of the collection of critical information to the distribution, and affected communities should be able to be involved in the design and feedback of the complaints mechanism itself and suggest the most appropriate and preferred format. Mechanisms should be comprehensive, but also include severity thresholds, i.e. separate complaints about open or ripped packaging is clearly separated from issues related to sexual favors or other abuse. Senior management should ensure that all complaints are followed up, of course, and all staff and volunteers involved in the distribution should be aware of the security risks, safeguarding policies and risk reduction measures, and how they relate to their specific roles. It's good to brief workers in communities and contractors on key topics such as humanitarian principles, safeguarding corruption, protection issues, security, and ensure that contractors understand and uphold humanitarian principles and your code of conduct. It's good to provide advanced capacity building and training to financial service providers if you are using a cash and voucher assistance approach, and suppliers take measures to prevent any failure to meet their contractual obligations. It's good to protect communities and other stakeholders, ensuring that any data collected is only used at the minimum necessary, and to confirm their identity and confirm their eligibility to the distribution of goods or vouchers. And it's good to ensure that data is stored and transmitted, of course, securely, and it is anonymized. Overall good community engagement reduces risks, enables appropriate services, and improves the intervention quality. And again, it establishes accountability. Standard 6, the final standard in this chapter, is around environmental impact, and the standard states that the distribution is organized and performed to minimize environmental impact. Key actions here are to assess past interventions regarding environmental impact to evaluate potential future consequences. It's good to incorporate environmental considerations into the distribution design and planning, including reverse logistics where the community does not have the resources to deal with waste, and define environmental impact indicators to track the performance of your distribution activities, as well as assess contractors' contribution to the total environmental impact and support them to minimize this impact such as by optimizing packaging or using more environmentally friendly materials. And it's good to make sure that you comply with local and national environmental regulations, particularly any related to waste management. Key indicators include the availability of an updated environmental impact review for the distribution, percentage waste on the site that is reused, repurposed, or recycled, the percentage of distribution sites that are restored to similar or better environmental conditions than before, and the percentage reduction in energy, paper, other utilities or resources consumed during subsequent distribution rounds. Other general guidance points are around being environmentally friendly and aware leads to savings over the life cycle of an intervention and can raise awareness of the value and importance of recycling. To evaluate performance, consider monitoring three main areas: social, economic, and environmental. And you could measure elements such as wastage, carbon footprint, water and electricity consumed, distances traveled, fuel consumed per beneficiary or per kit or item distribution, or emissions per budget amount spent. Whenever possible, packaging itself should be valuable as a distributed item, i.e. you can use pots to contain other kit items, or blankets can be used to wrap other materials as can plastic sheeting. And pay special attention to medical and other hazardous wastes, such as, say, chlorine, and follow WHO waste management guidelines whenever possible. Of course, it's good to set up a waste collection system where items can be split between those that can be recycled and general waste, which can be on other waste which can be composted, as mentioned earlier. It's good to integrate a post-distribution and cleaning activities that leave the distribution sites in a similar or better condition than before. And when choosing items to be distributed or used during a distribution, consider their environmental impact across the total life cycle. And consider what other agencies are doing in the area and the convenience of consolidating efforts to benefit from economies of scale and the pooling of resources. So I hope you found that short briefing useful. And of course, for further information, please take the time to read the chapter and consider reading other resources, as this chapter represents a very quick snapshot and overview of what is an important and sensitive activity.